Now, 7:08, a crisis in Europe is emerging as Germany rejects the UK's peace plans for Ukraine.
Speaking after a summit of European leaders yesterday, the Prime Minister reiterated that he is prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground in Ukraine if there is a lasting peace agreement.
Europe must play its role, and I'm prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground alongside others if there is a lasting peace agreement. But there must be a US backstop, because a US security guarantee is the only way to effectively deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again. So I will go to Washington next week to meet President Trump and to discuss what we see as the key elements of a lasting peace.
Well, meanwhile, the United States and Russia's most senior officials are set to meet in Saudi Arabia today after President Donald Trump announced peace talks with Russia.
Joining us now, Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, on this one. And then we've got Defence Editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Fraser, for you, first of all, what do you make of this?
Well, I'm not surprised by Olaf Scholz rejecting Keir Starmer's plan. He's got an election at the moment. Germany is so much more divided on the question of Ukraine than we are over here in Britain. Many people in Germany want to make nice with Russia. They think, they want to get the gas taps flowing again. The German economy and heavy industry has really, really suffered since the Ukraine war began. Now, we might say that's unprincipled, but that's their position and we should have known that's coming. It's also Spain and Poland disagree with Keir Starmer. And, what's necessary, if this idea is ever going to come off, there would need to be somewhere between 100,000, 200,000 troops in Ukraine. The British Army only has about 75,000 troops. That's only set to go down below 70,000 soon. Even with the participation of France and other European countries, it's just very difficult to see how a peacekeeping force could be maintained. This is why Starmer later on, after he started off the day yesterday with his piece in the Telegraph, summoning his inner Churchill, talking about how we were going to stand up to Putin almost alone. And now he is having to admit that actually, yes, without a US peace guarantee, this offer is kind of worthless.
What about these talks in Saudi Arabia today? Because there's obviously concern that if Putin emerges bullish from these preliminary talks, then obviously the likes of Poland and the Baltic states will be feeling really exposed, thinking, well, it gives him time to regroup and then maybe try again. Yeah,
that's the real danger with any peace or a ceasefire, that gives Putin the chance to rearm. I mean, we know that he is looking to expand the military. The Russian economy is on a total war footing at the moment. And actually, the Telegraph's reporting that some of Putin's demands are actually the removal of NATO troops from Poland and many Eastern European countries. Now, obviously, that is unacceptable, but it does give you an indication. I think a red line for him would be putting British troops or other European troops in Ukraine. So how it actually matches up with these peace talks is a bit of a mystery. But the talks are happening simultaneously. Europe is not invited to the Russia-US peace talks in the first place.
Or Ukraine.
Or Ukraine, either.
Well, let's get Robert Fox's take on all of this. Do you think you're going to see British boots on the ground in Ukraine, and if so, in what capacity?
Let's throw away the cliches. You're going to see British troops involved in some peacekeeping operation, I would think, within the next 2 or 3 years. This is the beginning of the beginning. All these things start this way. I'm thinking of a thing that this resembles very much UNPROFOR in Bosnia, which ran through Croatia from 1991 to 1995, where it was run by a command, really, shared between the Brits and the French. And this is what's going to happen this time. I want to leap ahead, and something that's not been mentioned. It will only have a credential and credibility if it conforms to a UN mandate. They got into a terrible mess over this in Kosovo, but it has to be underpinned. This was the basis of the Tony Blair doctrine, you may remember, and funnily enough, Starmer's key thinker on this, it seems, see him walking out with him from the Elysee Palace, is Tony Blair's right-hand man, Jonathan Powell. I think that we're being much too pessimistic. Yes, the army is in a poor state. The army isn't ready to fight a major war, as John Healey said. But funnily enough, I think the armed services have played their cards very well by not blabbing too much. And I think they're going to get a lot more than would have appeared only a few weeks ago in the Strategic Defence Review. That is the political problem this week for Starmer. He has made an offer. He has understood, finally, that if you're going to have a foreign policy, you must be able to, the awful, it's not a cliche, it's a real phrase, you have to be able to project power and utilise force, and your force has to be credible. So this is where the argument that's been pouring in like an avalanche from Rachel Reeves in accounts, from the Department of Accounts, Rachel Reeves of Accounts in the Treasury, who have been in the catbird seat thinking they could run defence and security policy. I think it's all to play for there. I think we're in the foothills of this. There are so many things that have to move, and there are a lot of things that Putin wants that actually Trump really doesn't want. And one of those is cheap gas. Because if the cheap gas flows, then this killing that has been made by the US and Qatar with liquid natural gas, LNG, goes. There's a lot of parts moving in this, and I fear that we're going to have a grumbling appendix-type war in Eastern Europe over Ukraine for some time to come, and I think that's why I think powers like Poland and the Nordics and the Baltics, who are becoming a coherent bloc now, are very good to be cautious about this. We haven't got a blueprint. It would have been amazing if a blueprint came out from the Elysee talks. But I think people are beginning to understand where they stand. And Fraser is absolutely right about the ambivalence of Germany. And it's going to be a heck of a problem throughout this. Because there's an element, and it's the far right and the far left in Germany meet. And they are pro-Russian and they are anti-Ukraine.
Final word, Fraser?
Yeah, I think, it's Europe's wake-up call, isn't it? We've had a bit of a holiday from history, sheltering under US power umbrella, military umbrella, and now difficult choices have to be made. OK, gentlemen, thank you both very much indeed. Please do have your say. You know how to get in touch.
Can we start by talking about Sir Keir Starmer, who's spoken about his willingness to put British troops on the ground in Ukraine as part of a peacekeeping force. Would you support that?
Well, I think the important thing to stress is, first of all, as you know, when we were in government, we stood by Ukraine at the outset of the invasion by Russia, and we provided them with weapons and munitions even before the invasion, which if we had not done so, they may well have fallen and been fully conquered, which would have been terrible for all of us and for the strategic position of NATO in particular. As it is, they have gone on to fight back valiantly. They've had our support, and then in opposition, we've strongly supported the government. So we will stand by the government in supporting Ukraine. I think on the specific question of sending in troops, obviously, that raises a lot of questions. We want to know exactly what, for example, the terms of engagement are and so on. But yeah, we wouldn't rule that out. And I just think at the moment, the focus has to be on two areas, if I may. Number one, Ukraine must be a principal voice in these negotiations. It's absolutely critical. They are the country that was invaded without provocation, who has suffered so much and shed so much blood. The other point, which I do think is critical, is we in the UK need to get on with increasing defence spending. There's no use talking about it. We have been waiting months now for them to get on with that, and I would urge them to start increasing spending and placing the procurement orders we need so that we can start replenishing the munitions, not least those we've given to Ukraine.
But James, what if the Americans and Russia say you're not having any role in the negotiations? What can you do about that?
But to be fair, they haven't said that. So if you look at General Kellogg, who is, I think, a key player in all this, he is the president's envoy to Ukraine, Russia. His position overnight, what he said is that Ukraine will have a role in the negotiations, but also emphasising that they take nothing off the table in respect of the US military. So I think, I do think it's very obvious this is an evolving situation. We're hearing lots of different things, lots of voices speaking. But I just think that the crucial thing is to focus on what really matters here. And I think to, your viewers at home, they will be slightly surprised to hear the Prime Minister suddenly so keenly talking about defence spending and security in Europe, when actually what we've seen is a rush to do things like the Chagos deal, which undermine our security, and to date, lots of prevarication on higher defence spending. So I think that's where the priority has to be back home.